Welcome, members, independent members, officers, to today's Audit and Governance meeting. We've got a packed agenda, so let's rattle through. First item on our agenda today is apologies. Do we have any apologies?
Yes, we do, Chair. Apologies from Tony Dolman and Councillor Smale.
Thank you. Item number 2, late items to be introduced by the Chair. I have none. Thank you. Item number 3, declarations of interest. Either declare them now or at the time the agenda item drops up. Are there any? Thank you. Item number 4 are the minutes of the meeting of the 25th of February 2026. Moved. Thank you. If we're all happy with that, then we'll accept them as a true record. Moving on then, item number 5 on our agenda is to review the outstanding resolutions. Does anybody here? Everybody's had a copy. Does anybody have any queries or comments? Fantastic. Set your watches. We'll be home by 11. Item number 6 then on our agenda is an update from external audit. Now, we do have a guest. If you'd like to present your update now, thank you.
Thanks, Chair. So we're just doing our planning and interim work at the minute, and we'd just like to thank the finance team for how quickly they've got us all of the information. So there's nothing specifically to raise at this point. We have got our finals work planned in for July and August, and we'll be doing a full balance sheet audit, which should help us towards rebuilding.
Does anybody have any queries for external audit? Please go ahead.
Do you anticipate any delays in completing the audit and signing off whatever you can sign off?
Not at this point. We've agreed dates with the council, and everything's due to go ahead, and hopefully everything can be completed within July and August to then bring a report back to you with any findings.
So you anticipate working papers and all that sort of thing will be available and everything else will be okay at this point?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Are there any more queries? Wonderful. We can move on then to item number 7. What we're actually going to do, if it's okay, members, we're going to merge items 7 and 8 together and receive reports on both the Treasury Management Quarter 3 report and non-Treasury capital prudential indicators, plus the Treasury Management Investment Strategy report for 26-27. Is that okay? Okay. Thank you. Over to you. What we're going to do, if it's okay, members, we're going to merge items 7 and 8 together and receive reports on both the Treasury Management Quarter 3 report and Treasury.
So as you said, I've got 2 reports that I will be presenting today. Firstly, the Quarter 3 Treasury Management report, followed by the 26-27 Treasury Management Strategy report. Okay. This presentation provides an update to the committee on the key points from the Treasury Management Quarter 3 report and the 26-27 Treasury Management Strategy. Please refer to the full report for full details. Next slide, please. At Quarter 3, the Council's Treasury activities remained in line with the approved Treasury Management Strategy. Borrowing levels have been managed prudently and cash balances have been invested securely and in line with counterparty limits. Debt maturity profiles remain well balanced. In Quarter 3, there was a second breach of the maximum balance limit on the Council's main bank account with Lloyds. This was a planned and approved breach agreed in advance by the Section 151 officer. To note, though, that in the Cabinet report it incorrectly stated that this breach arose from a capital receipt. This will be corrected in the Quarter 4 outturn report. The breach actually related to a temporary increase in the account balance to ensure sufficient funds were available to meet a contractual purchase payment due the following morning. As overnight investment returns could not be guaranteed to clear by the required early morning deadline, a balance of 10 million was held in the account overnight for one night only. No penalties were incurred and the associated risk was considered minimal. The Council continues to maintain strong liquidity and compliance with all other prudential and Treasury indicators. No further breaches have occurred and no significant risks have been identified in the year to date. The Bank of England base rate at the end of Q3 was 3.75, following a 0.25% rate reduction agreed in December. As at 31st December, Treasury is forecasting a balanced budget position. Next slide, please. No further breaches have occurred and no significant... So this slide shows the actual debt position at the end of the quarter, excluding any planned borrowing for the rest of the year. At the end of the quarter, the total borrowing stood at just over 587 million. All short-term borrowing has now been repaid. Over the past 9 months, total borrowing increased by 9.8 million due to new long-term loans totaling 120 million, net off against 110.2 million in short-term loan repayments. The new long-term loans were taken out to refinance the short-term loans repaid, and long-term borrowing was selected due to favourable rates at that point in time. Debt limits continue to be well within their operational boundary and authorised limits. Next slide, please. 10.2 million in short-term loan repayments. This slide provides the investment balances held by counterparty type. Please note that some of the figures have been updated on this table on this slide. Cabinet report shows incorrect movement figures for bank and building societies and DMO. However, all the total figures on the table are correct. Invested funds consist of income received in advance of expenditure, plus reserves and other balances held. During Q3 period to the 31st of December, the Council's daily investment balances range between 48 million and 144 million. This reflects the timing difference between income and expenditure, and as of the 31st of December, the balance was 144 million. The high end of quarter balance was due to taking out new loans in the timing of planned expenditure. Due to this, we have been able to take out short-term investments in the LA market, which have provided a slightly higher rate of return compared to our other counterparties. Next slide, please. And as of the 31st of December, the balance was 100. So we're moving on to the Treasury Management Strategy. The Treasury Management Strategy was approved at full council in February. Under the 6th Treasury Management Code 2021, the Council is required to approve its Treasury Management Strategy on an annual basis. Adopting the Code provides a robust framework for well-controlled and transparent Treasury management, clearly setting out the respective roles and responsibilities of members and officers. Importantly, it also ensures the Council's Treasury activities comply with the requirements of the Local Government Act 2003. Next slide, please. Management strategy on an annual basis. The strategy report sets out the borrowing investment strategy, Treasury management, potential indicators and Treasury risks for the new financial year 26-27. This presentation gives a brief overview of these areas, including an overview on short-term borrowing, why we use short-term borrowing and an outline on the markets and terms we use. Next slide, please. The strategy report sets out the borrowing investment strategy, Treasury management. The Council's borrowing strategy continues to prioritise affordability while maintaining the long-term stability of its debt portfolio. Short-term interest rates have fallen over the past year and are expected to ease slightly further. However, long-term borrowing costs remain elevated, making it more cost-effective over the medium term to utilise internal resources or rely on short to medium-term borrowing until opportunities arise to secure more favourable long-term rates. This approach helps to reduce borrowing costs and manage financial risk, even though it may result in lower returns on investments in the short term. The position will be kept under regular review, balancing the benefits of short-term borrowing against the potential cost of delay in longer-term borrowing should rates improve. Recent US military action against Iranian targets has led to a short-term rise in energy prices and increased caution in UK financial markets. At present, this is considered a temporary increase in risk linked to geopolitical tensions, rather than a significant long-term shock to the financial system. Market conditions will continue to be closely monitored in consultation with the Council's Treasury advisors. Ireland Close continues to support the Council, providing expert advice on borrowing strategy, market timing and risk management, helping to ensure that funding decisions remain both cost-effective and financially sustainable. Next slide, please. So why do we take out short-term borrowing? So short-term borrowing supports effective cash flow management by covering temporary timing difference between income and expenditure. Money comes in at a specific time, such as council tax, business rates and grant payments, but payments go out constantly, such as salaries, supplies and services. If cash is arriving next month but bills are due this month, then a short-term fix is required to ensure essential services continue without disruption. It It also provides bridge funding to meet urgent or unexpected commitments while longer-term financing is arranged. In addition, short-term borrowing can be more cost-effective as interest rates are often lower than longer-term borrowing, helping to minimise overall financing costs at a time when long-term rates have remained elevated. And finally, it offers flexibility as facilities can be arranged quickly and repaid as soon as funds are available, enabling a responsive and agile approach to financial planning. Next slide, please. Helping to minimise overall financing. Though we typically use the local authority market for short-term loans, as PWLB and other lenders either do not offer such short-term or the terms are not favourable. Short-term loans are often between one month and up to 1 year, depending on the cash flow requirement and interest rates at that point in time. For example, if we are borrowing to cover temporary cash flows, this would usually be for a period of 1 to 3 months. But if we are short-term borrowing to delay longer-term borrowing due to high interest rates, then we could borrow for up to 1 year. Local authorities borrow from each other for short-term needs because it's practical, cheap and relatively low risk for everyone involved. This is called the LA to LA market. Short-term loans between councils can often be arranged quickly and tailored precisely to your requirements. So, for example, you can have a loan for a few days, weeks, months, which is ideal for managing temporary cash flow gaps. And SIT for Guidance explicitly allows and regulates inter-authority borrowing as a sensible treasury management tool. Next slide, please. Officers regularly review interest rates and monitor the council's cash flow to maintain a prudent balance between cost certainty and risk management. In doing so, the council seeks to minimise exposure to high long-term interest rates by using short-term borrowing where appropriate, while ensuring funds are available for the periods they are required. Guidance from our Treasury advisors supports decision-making across short, medium and long-term borrowing, helping to assess risk and identify opportunities to optimise the debt portfolio. This approach ensures that borrowing decisions remain both affordable and aligned with the council's long-term financial strategy, while ensuring funds are available for the periods they are required. The CIPFA Code requires the councils to invest its treasury funds prudently and to have regard to the security and liquidity of its investments before seeking the highest rate of return or yield. The council's objective when investing money is to strike an appropriate balance between risk and return, minimising the risk of incurring losses from defaults and the risk of receiving unsuitably low investment income. The council expects to be a long-term borrower, and new treasury investments will therefore be made primarily to manage day-to-day cash flows using short-term, low-risk instruments. The council's objective when investing money is to strike an appropriate balance between risk and return. Currently, the majority of the council's surplus cash is held in short-term money market funds. During the period of 31st of December, these investments earned an average interest rate of 3.77%, with an average duration of 11 days. Given the council's borrowing requirements, our priority remains to focus on liquidity rather than chasing high returns, so there is limited scope to improve these yields. Full details of the recommended counterparties and limits are set out in the report. It should be noted that the investment limit for money market funds has increased from 7 million to 10 million per fund for the 26-27 strategy. There have been no other changes to limits or counterparties in this year's Treasury Management Strategy. The limit has been increased to provide greater flexibility, allowing the Council to invest larger amounts in safe short-term instruments. This approach helps optimise returns while maintaining a low risk profile. Next slide, please. There have been no other changes. This slide shows the indicators the Council uses to measure and manage Treasury management risks. There are 6 indicators required under the Prudential Code split into Treasury and non-Treasury capital categories. Treasury indicators cover aspects such as the maturity structure of borrowing, the total principal sums invested for periods longer than a year, and the liability benchmark. These ensure borrowing and investment remain within safe and sustainable limits. They cover overall debt levels, borrowing maturity profiles, long-term investments, and the liability benchmarking, helping us maintain control and manage risk effectively. Non-Treasury or capital indicators include the authorised limit, operational boundary, and external debt, which are reported in the capital strategy. It's important to note that there are no new indicators in and no changes to the calculations of any of the indicators compared to last year's strategy. This continuity ensures consistent monitoring of the Council's financial exposures while maintaining a stable approach to risk management. Indicator performance is reported quarterly to Cabinet and this committee. There are no new indicators and no changes to the calculations of any of the indicators compared to. The report outlines the Treasury management risks faced by the Council and the actions in place to manage and reduce these risks. In relation to borrowing risk, Treasury officers work closely with our advisors and regularly monitor interest rates and cash flow to ensure borrowing is undertaken at the most advantageous and low-risk time. Credit risk is managed through the annual investment strategy, which sets strict criteria for approved counterparties and is regularly updated to reflect credit rating changes. To address liquidity risk, cash flow is monitored daily and the Council maintains access to instant access funds to meet short-term commitments. Credit risk is managed. Refinancing and maturity risk is managed by monitoring the maturity profile of both debt and investments to avoid large amounts falling due at the same time. And finally, market risk, particularly changes in interest rates, controlled through limits on exposure and by maintaining fixed rate borrowing with ongoing monitoring by the finance team. That's the end of the presentation. Happy to take any questions. The maturity profile of both debt and investments to avoid large amounts falling due at the same time.
Thank you, Chair. I just wondered what the global financial turbulence that we have currently in the money markets will affect the things that you have in your presentation when you said we hope for stable or lowering interest rates. Certainly for the next few months, we might be seeing interest rates going up. I just wondered what those turbulent money markets globally may affect our position and our plans moving forward. Thank you.
So at the moment, they're looking at it, like you say, as a temporary geopolitical risk, not a long-term factor. And fortunately for us at the moment, we aren't looking to borrow until later on into the year. So we're going to use internal resources. Hopefully that will remain the state. But we do have higher interest rates factored in for any of these risks into the strategy and in our costings for anything that we're borrowing.
So you've got plans to open the Straits of Hormuz? Good. Yeah, I'm glad we're obviously Council leading the way. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Wilson first.
So when we're building the strategy, we're always looking at the risk associated with everything, and we're planning, when we're forecasting borrowing, we do it over annuity rate, so it looks at your long-term effects, and a lot of risk is built into that already, so we factor that into the borrowing costs.
Mr. Stone, did you have a query?
Thank you, Chair. Thanks for the report. It's really clear. Thank you. Again, just picking up on points that have been made by members already around the current market conditions, and we've talked a lot about risk. So is that being recognised in finance risk registers and corporate risk registers in terms of what the impact might be on the finances and I suppose other areas, if you look at what happened with Ukraine a few years ago and the impact that had on prices and particularly around procurement, etc. I think as an audit committee, that's the kind of assurance that we want to see.
So in terms of the strategic risks, yes, absolutely. It's something that obviously that's monitored every month and as new risks come forward. So this is one that has been highlighted. And when we're doing the planning with the Treasury, we do build in quite significant contingencies into the capital programme and into the Treasury to be able to deal with any of those fluctuations so we don't get that sudden hit on the financial impact of the council.
Councillor Kerr.
I was wanting to move into a slightly different area, if I may, if there aren't any more current economic situation questions. And that's about the borrowing and the point on 4.5.2, which 4.5.1 and 5.2, which is talking about borrowing not for investment purposes. One of the challenges we've got at the moment is that land that's available is being pushed really strongly into housing, which means that it's harder to develop a community that has a range of resources other than housing. And one way that we could change that would be for us to take control of the land that has been allocated for non-housing purposes for business within an estate. Is that something that would be allowed within the CIPFA code, because we're looking at our local plan and the development of communities, or is it something that would be considered to be an investment for the future?
I'm a little unclear on the question, Councillor Clare, but in terms of we can't borrow monies to then invest monies. So I think if that scenario we were looking to purchase something, we wouldn't be able to borrow to be able to invest into that. So I'm sorry, I'm a bit unclear.
That's fine, Chair. Shall I talk with you about it later?
Are there any more queries or comments? Mr Webster and then Mr Sunderland.
Thank you. So I just have a point about the timing or the scheduling of the report. It happens to be on the same agenda as the Constitution. In the Constitution it says we should consider the robustness of the Treasury management strategy before submission to Cabinet to ensure that controls are satisfactory. We're now receiving it after it's been approved. So we've really looked at perhaps for next year in terms of scheduling the report.
I'll take that as a procedural issue. Yeah, thank you. Good spot. Yeah, Mr Sunderland.
I'm really interested in the relationship the council have with its Treasury advisors, Arling Close. Is it a daily, is it an hourly, is it a weekly? Do you have a named person or named individuals within Arling Close? How does the relationship work? Is it you, or is it Alison, or is it anybody? And if you're not around and something happens, what then? You know, what is there a plan B if an individual doesn't happen to be around and an incident such as we're seeing at the moment happens, and you happen to be on holiday? You know.
So, in terms of the relationship with Arling Close, it's a really, really positive relationship. Those conversations happen from across the team, from myself down to junior members of staff, as and when those conversations need to happen. So it's not hierarchical. It is an open it is an open relationship, and we really we feel we get a really good service and good relationship with Arling Close, and are assured by their advice. In terms of if I'm not around, we do have protocols in place. In terms of, we do have a deputy Section 151 officer who has the delegated authority to be able to act on my behalf. So if we do need to make some emergency borrowing or investments, then there's adequate approvals within the team to be able to carry those duties out.
So at any one time, if you're not available, somebody else is. Who is the deputy?
Tony Nash is the deputy Section 151.
Yeah. So if you're not around, Tony, is one or other, are you always available in that sense?
Yeah, and there's a protocol for signing for dealing, so it's not all in. You've got to segregation of duties and controls in that. So there's a whole control framework around the borrowing and approvals associated with that as well. It's not just left to me to be able to do the borrowing.
Does it also cover weekends, or does anything happen at weekends? Does everybody go home and forget about it?
Yeah, nothing happens at the weekends. We don't have anything going generally or coming in or going out of the account, so it's quite stable. And the markets, PWRB and that, are closed at the weekends as well.
Thanks. Good point raised. Yeah. Are there any more queries or comments? Okay, to take the recommendations in order then. First of all, to note the Treasury Management out-turn position as presented. Thank you for the presentation. Nice and clear. We'll take them in block. So the next recommendation is to note the Council approved the following at its meeting 2026. Well, we've been through the minutes of that anyway. And to note that the Council will delegate to Section 151 officer the amended investment levels following appropriate advice from the Treasury, as per the report. Are we all happy with those recommendations? Thanks, members. In which case, then, we can move on to item number 9 on our agenda, which is accounting policies.
I'll pick this one up. Can I just say before we just go on to the accounting policies, I meant to do in the last item really, but just to reference back to for committee that we did have a Treasury audit last year. I don't know if you're aware, and we did get substantial assurance on that audit as well. So that's just to round that piece of work off. This is a standard report that comes every year to Audit Committee around our accounting policies for 25-26, which we will be preparing the accounts very, very soon. And Leah from External Audit has given us some really good news that the External Audit will be carrying out their audit over the summer this year. So we will be going, back to that normal process in terms of how we do things. So the accounting policy is nothing significant to note. There's one change in the accounting policy, and that's in relation to the valuations of property, plant and equipment. There's a new proposal that's been required for the 25-26 accounts, and that's in how we do the valuation of the assets, and it's moving to an indexation methodology. So there's a valuation every 5 years, and then an indexation that will run in between those revaluation years. We see this as a really, really positive movement. It will after the original setup, this will make the simplification within that, and hopefully will make it easier for audit in terms of the standardisation, in terms of that indexation, and it will help with comparisons and within the sector, because we will be all moving to a sort of a more transparent way of valuation of those assets. So that's the only change to the accounting policies for 25-26.
Thank you for that. Everyone's had a copy. Thank you for explaining the material differences between them. Does anybody have any queries or comments? Councillor Kerr.
I can't find the right page now, but there was a reference to things like furniture assets and valuing them, and I'm thinking of things like books in libraries as well, which might be something that we're putting an asset value to. But some of these are actually worth really little once they're second-hand. And I just wondered whether there was a process by which we actually write stuff off and accept that the value of things are now very low. How that works.
So in the capital strategy, we have a de minimis value of 10k. So any assets under that on the asset register don't get capitalised. So those kind of assets will come under that category.
So was the reference to furniture in that bullet point, which I can't find, was that actually correct, or should we be not thinking about furniture values unless it's of antique quality?
So it's probably just generalised on the category, but for an example, the council house, if we refurbish the council house and add new furniture, the cost of that would be considered enough to go on the asset register, so that would be applicable to it then.
Does that answer your question?
Not entirely. I found the right page now. It's page 109 at the top of it. It says it applies to the following asset categories: other land and buildings, vehicles, plant, furniture and equipment. So I can't quite see, even a vehicle, if we buy a new vehicle, it loses, 20% of its value by the fact we've purchased it.
So in that report, it is just general SIPFA categories that have been included on there for information, because that's what's covered within the indexation applied. So anything under 10k wouldn't be applicable to it because we wouldn't have it on our asset register. For vehicles, some can be excluded from the the guidance if they're carried at cost, so that would remove that. We do value our vehicles at cost, so we wouldn't apply indexation to those category of assets.
Sounds like there are a number of processes that are gone through to establish the values of these, from a Treasury perspective, to establish the value of these assets, and I'm sure that that information can be shared on request if requests are made. Mr. Snell.
Thank you, Chair. It was just a question really for Alison, because you mentioned the indexation, property, plant and equipment. You said initial setup will help and is welcomed going forward. So is your team ready for that setup? Because I know things like this can often trip up as you get into kind of closing down.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've got some external support, some external advisors that help us with our valuations anyway, and they've been commissioned to do this piece of work.
Great question. Are there any more questions, members, or comments? Okay, thank you. In which case then, the recommendation is to consider and approve the accounting policies to be used in completing the 25-26 statement of accounts, as set out in the appendix we've all seen, and to delegate to the Section 151 officer the power to make new accounting policies and amend existing policies as may become necessary in the production of the accounts during the external audit process, with any such changes being reported back to this committee. Are we all happy with the recommendation? Yeah. Thank you. We can move on then. Item number 10 on our agenda today is Internal Audit Progress Report and the QAIP. Over to you.
Thank you. So starting with the progress report, this covers the period 16th of January through to the 12th of March. In terms of the planned progress, the majority of the audits are underway or have been allocated and are about to commence. As per this report, there were 2 audits that hadn't been allocated at the time of producing this. So one of those was the SEND audit. This one we had put in the Q4 plan, knowing that we would need to wait until the Ofsted inspection had been undertaken before we can start. That inspection hasn't happened yet. Plus, we were going to be looking at the dedicated schools grant monies and the statutory override. And obviously the government had made an announcement about writing off the DSG deficit. So we need to obviously see what the expectations of government are around those write-offs before we can fully scope out this piece of work. So that's why that one hasn't started yet. The other piece of work was on the Aller Street Park audit. That one hadn't been allocated as at the time of producing this report. We hadn't identified a resource within the team to be able to do it. We now have identified a resource to undertake that work, so that one will be commencing shortly. I have outlined a number of plan changes on page 7 of the report, so just to summarise those, the housing standards audit won't be moving forward, and that's because of the housing regulator inspection, so that one's going to be removed from the plan. The waste treatment centre audit, we haven't commenced that in year, and I've taken the decision to remove that one from the current plan of work until after the report's been taken to Cabinet in June or July. And another plan change is to the scope of the parking services audit. We've had to amend the scope of that one, so now we are considering digital identification and enforcement of parking contraventions, and we're also going to be following up on issues around parking permits from a previous audit. The intention is that the original scope on parking services will look to deliver in the next piece of work that we do around that. In terms of completed audits in the period, there are just 2 pieces of work. One relates to a piece of grant certification work on the bus services operator grant. So ordinarily for grant work, what we would do is we'd just look for compliance with grant terms and conditions. If those were met, we'd sign off the grant returns and you'd just get a summary to confirm that we hadn't identified issues regarding that grant. But when we were performing the checks on the bus service operators grant, we did identify a small number of issues that we did feel the need to make some formal recommendations about. So I've included those weaknesses in this report for committee's information, and you can see that 2 of the issues have been addressed and management risk accepted, one of the issues. The other completed work relates to the Programme Management Office, and that's just the role that internal audit plays on the assurance and the development group. It hasn't resulted in any audit recommendations, but what that piece of work does is it does give me some assurance, for my opinion, over the robustness of project management within the council. Regarding the recommendations position, We've again seen a reduction in the number of open recommendations. So I believe my last update to this committee in January, we had 100 open recommendations. Now we're down to 85. In terms of the highlighted recommendations within this report, these have all previously been reported through to you. They're all in the delayed future action status. So that means that we have had officer engagement to get an update on those actions and to address the issues. And we've been provided with revised action dates, which are in the future. A lot of those revised action dates are, however, about to become due, so they'll fall in either at the end of this month or at the beginning of next month, so we'll obviously be following up on those very soon. The other appended item on this agenda item is the QUAPE action plan. That's a bit of a mixed picture. So some actions obviously have been completed, some are underway, and some are requiring a little bit more time to complete. I was just going to pick up on one of the actions, number 7. That's to fully implement the K10 audit management system. We did set a revised target date of the 31st of March 26 for that one, and I can confirm that that one is going to be closed off. Just to confirm that the progress report that I've just presented to you, that is the first progress report that's been entirely generated from the K10 system. So that was one of the things that we were waiting for the system to be able to do before we could move away from our old process. So we've delivered on that action now, and what that means is that that's a really big step forward for us, and it means that we're going to be able to cease using our old audit management system, which we've had to keep dual running for the last couple of years. So from the next financial year onwards, we will just be purely running off K10. So whilst that might seem like a small thing, that is actually a really big positive thing and a big win for the team. It just means that it's going to save us some time in terms of having to do the dual system running that we've had to do for the last couple of years. That was all I was going to say on those 2 items, Chair, but happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Hannah. Well done on the K10 implementation. Do we have any? Yeah, Councillor Wright.
Yeah, I've just got a question on the home to school travel, a recommendation around how we record and manage that very big budget, and one that is, because you've got a lot of contractors and probably scope for efficiency savings. It says that we manage it in form of an Excel spreadsheet, which sounds to me as not the most effective way of doing it in the current climate, especially when the council's investing such a large amount of money in AI capability that's yielded results in other areas like debt management. So, and I notice in other recommendations it refers to antiquated IT systems, and the explanation is given the workload of the IT department, which I understand, but when you consider the potential risks and opportunities for saving this area, the question is, you know, what's your assessment in terms of, I know this, you recommend that you move from that system, is how we actually prioritise that and raise it up the list of priorities.
That's a bit of a difficult one for me to answer. I'm obviously not in charge of prioritising the development work within the council, and I think strategically there has been that decision to prioritise things like the AI development work, and I think that's where the resources have gone to, and I think Alison wants to come in on that point. Obviously, we can just stress to the individual service areas the risks around operating the way that they're operating and trying to encourage them to move to a more effective way of doing things and a better controlled way of doing things. And that's why these recommendations are often rated as a moderate risk recommendation. You know, it's something that we do strongly recommend. Stop relying on that traditional way of doing something. It's old-fashioned. There are risks around it. And we do think that you need to be pushing for development in this area. But I can't really speak to how the council arrives at the decisions about what they prioritise.
So I'll just jump in on there. So we do have a digital enablement board that looks at prioritisation of projects that come through the gateway based on a number of factors, whether that's around risks of delivery of statutory responsibilities, focusing on MTFP savings, so that there is a categorisation. This is not deemed as one of those priorities at this stage. But just to give you some assurance, Councillor Wright, and committee some assurance, this service has done some really great things recently, the home to school transport. It's not something that's on my keeping awake at night list. If you look at the budget report, there was some significant savings in the budget report, I think around 600,000 that have been delivered through contract management in this area. So the service have delivered some great services. So yeah, I acknowledge that in an ideal world, better IT system would be great, but they are delivering value for money in terms of the contracts that they're dealing with, and what we need to think about going forward is local government reorganisation and what priorities are around IT systems for safe and sound and legal and secure from the 1st of April 2028 should we go forward with LGR. So it's quite likely that if we do progress with LGR, this probably won't be a priority going forward, but I acknowledge committees sentiment in that area.
It's an answer. You answered your query, yeah?
Yeah, I mean, in part, I understand that, but when you actually look through some of the other recommendations, it's the same story, it's the same line. And I do take your point, but, it does seem, some of these basic functions, when we're trying to improve the efficiency of the council, it just, and compared that, when you're comparing against the investment in a solution that you would anticipate would generate quite quick results in some of the areas. Transferring a spreadsheet into a more modern system isn't, it's not exactly rocket science. So, yeah, I mean, I take the explanation, but, I suppose I'm just a bit disappointed.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Wright. I can see the issue from both sides. Councillor Kerr.
I was just wondering whether it's something that is on the AI project board's list of possible projects, or whether we should be asking questions about that.
Could be a quick win, right? But how do we get something onto that board's agenda? We can perhaps just make a recommendation, or...
I mean, the board has looked at all the 200 and whatever opportunities there were for AI and have prioritised those based on what the rate of return would be on that. So I think there's a lot of scrutiny and acknowledgement of those things. But there are bigger priorities at the moment that have delivered the savings that we have in that space. So, I accept, there are lots of things we would like to do. It's about prioritising and managing the capacity that we've got of the teams.
Any more queries or comments on that? Yeah, Mr. Webster.
Yes, I'd like to ask about the plan. I mean, last report, last time we came to committee, you had various resource issues and we're targeting 90% of the plan, but at that point, I think 13.6% down at the end of December. When you can give us an update, what's the current position? Are you going to be able to complete enough of the plan?
Yeah. So yeah, you're right. Obviously, my last update to you, we were 13.6% behind at December. It dropped a little bit. We went to 14.6% behind at the end of January, but at the end of February, we pulled it back a little bit to be 10.8% behind. So still behind, but a bit of an improved position over the last few weeks. Obviously, we're nearly at year end, so I will have some improved, hopefully some further updates on those in the coming week or so. But yeah, still thinking that we're not going to hit that 90% plan delivery, but it doesn't feel as bleak as where we were when I talked to you about this in January.
Will there still be enough to meet your annual opinion?
For my opinion, yeah. So obviously I don't need to bring my opinion to you until the June committee meeting. So we've still got the April and May period to catch up a little bit and to deliver some more work which can influence that opinion. But yeah, I don't anticipate it's going to be a problem being able to give you an opinion on the work done so far and the work that we can still be doing in the next couple of months.
Okay. Just to add to that as well, Hannah has got access to some additional resource through a framework that we've got, that which you will see some of those unallocated audits that she referred to have now been allocated, and that's through that additional resource that's been identified. So I think that will help.
Mr. Sunderland.
Just it's professional interest, really. On page 143, there's a work has been done around, and I've worked in local authorities for large my career and things, and work has been done around professional courage and root cause analysis. What on earth is professional courage? I mean, I'm just intrigued, really.
Yes.
I've never come across it before.
So this has come about through the new global internal audit standards, and effectively it means being able to stand up for yourself and being able to challenge things, not being kind of dissuaded or discouraged from being able to raise concerns, speak through issues, that kind of thing.
I never really had that problem, so maybe that's why I've not come across it. But
it's something that you would imagine anyone working in my profession shouldn't have a problem with. But
absolutely, I've never heard it called that, though.
Yeah.
So I suppose everything has a label these days, doesn't it? I noticed somewhere else, at a slightly different point, are you advertising for staff to fill in? Is this to fill in the gaps where you're short of staff?
So one of the things that the head of partnership has wanted to do is to build a bank or a pool of experienced internal auditors that can be called on to deliver individual audit assignments when the need arises. So they wouldn't be full-time permanent members of staff, but they would be people that would be familiar with CMAP's processes, and they could come in and deliver individual audit assignments. So that's what we're advertising for at the moment, is to get expressions of interest from individuals who might want to come in and do those pieces of work from time to time.
So it's effectively a contract work, is it?
Effectively, yeah.
Thank you. Mr. Webster.
Yes, thank you. Just a couple of other points. I mean, again, looking at the QAIP, as you say, things have been put back or some of the actions there. I guess that's, again, to do with resources. I take it that the ones that are not completed this year will be carried forward into next year, and also that when you do your annual assessment against the global standards, there'll be further actions arising from that as well.
Yeah, so you're right. Obviously, the global internal audit standards assessment against that will churn out the actions that we need to take. If they're not done here, there's a very high chance that they'll then appear on the 26-27 version of this document. I obviously don't know what the outcome of that assessment is at this point in time.
When is that assessment?
Sorry,
when will that assessment take place?
So it is underway. It's something that the head of partnership is leading on. I don't have a deadline for when it will be done, but it is underway at the moment.
And finally, on recommendation tracking, yes, the figures are coming down still. That's very good, and that's congratulations to you and your team for pushing that. As you say, there's a lot due at the end of March, and people tend to say we'll do this by the end of the financial year. So it'll be interesting to see what happens after that. But it's good progress so far.
Thank you. Are there any other queries or comments? Okay. Recommendations then are to note the progress being made by internal audit on its work in 25-26 outlined in the report in Appendix 1, to review the control issues being raised by internal audit and management's response to the risks, which we've done, and to review the progress being made by management in respect of implementation of internal audit recommendations, which we've done. Councillor Kerr?
Could we welcome the reduction, the progress that's being made on the actions? Because I also thought that there was a nice step in the right direction, and I think it would be positive feedback.
Thank you. Yeah, I accept that, yeah. And finally, to note the actions being undertaken on the CMAP, by CMAP on the QAIP in Appendix 2. We're all happy with the recommendations as revised. Thank you. Moving on then, item number 11 on our agenda is the Q1 26-27 Internal Audit Plan and Internal Audit Charter. Off to you again.
Thank you. Obviously, as you're all aware, I bring the internal audit plan to you for approval, and this comes through on a quarterly basis. As discussed, obviously, at the January meeting, and as we've just referred to now, we have had some resourcing issues in CMAP, and that's impacted on delivery of audits. So there are going to be a number of audits that will be carried forward into 26-27 for completion. I'm not intending to add a load more audit work into the mix for the first quarter because I want to give the team a chance to catch up a little bit. But I think it's just important to note that for any audits that we complete in 26-27, they can inform my opinion for that financial year as well as for the financial year that we're working on them. So obviously in the Q1 plan, as well as a number of assurance-based audits that we intend to commence in Q1, I've also included in the plan the pieces of consultancy and advisory work that we'll be undertaking throughout the year. So these usually relate to roles that officers from internal audit team play on the various boards and groups throughout the council. And I'm including that information so you just get a bit more of a fuller position on the sources of assurance that I can get outside of the traditional audits. I've also been through the indicative audit work portion of the plan and refreshed that a little bit, and wherever possible I've tried to give an indication on when some of these audits are likely to commence again, just for a bit of clarity for the committee. So that was everything I was going to say on the first part of this report, which is the audit plan. Obviously the second part of this particular agenda item relates to the internal audit charter. So under the global internal audit standards, the committee needs to see and approve the charter and the mandate document. So the charter, as we've discussed before, defines the internal audit's purpose, authority, responsibility and position within the organisation, and it sets out the nature of services that CMAP will provide and how internal audit will help with the achievement of objectives. So we have reviewed and updated the charter during 25-26 to bring it in line with the global internal audit standards, and this was brought to committee in July 2025. I've again reviewed the document. I haven't felt the need to make any changes or amendments to it, so I am presenting it again to you for approval, and the idea is that doing it at this point in time kind of sees us into the next financial year and what we're looking for delivery, etc., for 26-27. So looking for approval of both of those items. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, any questions or comments? Councillor Kerr.
This is something I'm not sure whether we should be looking at this in terms of internal audit, and I would welcome comments from other councillors in particular. But I have periodically people coming to me concerned about the lack of progress on items. Most often this is to do with planning applications where it's gone over the deadline and they're waiting to build their house or their extension and they're still waiting for an answer. And there seems to be a lag in the system, and we know that the government has key performance indicators about the delivery of planning decisions. And I'm wondering whether that is impacting on those applications that have already missed the key performance deadline. Are they then not getting the priority because others seem to be more important to deal with first? And I've more recently had a query about freedom of information requests, and again we have coming to our meetings stats on freedom of information and the KPIs to do with that as well. And I just wondered whether we are prioritising the KPIs over the delivery of requests, and whether that is something that should be looked at. So I'm not saying we should do it, I just wonder whether there is some professional guidance as to whether it's something that there would be value in looking at.
Thanks, Councillor Kerr. So for clarity, is the proposal or the idea that we would look at putting into the long-range plan an audit of those areas to see whether or not?
I think it's some advice from internal audit as to whether there is something that there would be value in looking at, and other members who might have similar experience to me who may want to contribute to that thinking as well.
I think I would like to take this away and have some discussion with relevant officers to see what they've got in place effectively, and if we can deliver some internal audit around this. it's an interesting point and a valid point that the councillor's making. It's just what, in terms of internal audit, could do in terms of assessing the processes and the controls in place, whether there is something formally there that we can look at. So I'd like to take that away, if that's okay, Chair.
I just add to that as well. I think the council recognise that capacity in these areas have been constrained and it's been a difficult. The budget for this year, for 26-27, does put some additional capacity into planning, which is welcomed. And hopefully we'll deal with some of those issues. Information governance and FOI continues to be a strain in terms of capacity, resource, and I think it's probably more about that than process, if I'm being absolutely honest. But you know, we acknowledge that there are some areas in the council where we do have capacity constraints, if that's through resource or through being able to recruit the right professional qualified staff in those areas as well, which I think is probably more in the IG space than in the planning space.
Thanks for the clarity. It does feel like there's a question to answer on the record. So yeah, let's take it away. Think about whether there's merit in formally making those inquiries. Thank you. Are there any more queries or comments? Sunderland. Just
linking in what David said earlier on, actually, on 7.2, you talk about getting a refund because of undelivered audit days. Is that significant? Is it 10%, 5%, 20%, whatever? And I think you've already assured us that that will then not affect your decision at the end of the day whether you feel you've got satisfactory procedures in place. Is that still correct?
Yeah, so picking up on the refund point, that's still got to be calculated. We need to see the financial year out to know how many audit days have actually been spent, and then we can do the calculation. So I can't answer whether it's going to be a significant refund or not at this point in time. Obviously, I can let committee know in the future what that is, but at this point in time, I can't comment on the significance of it. Sorry, remind me on your second point. Do you anticipate giving a clear opinion on the process? I anticipate having enough information to inform my opinion, yes.
Yeah, that's the most important thing.
Thank you. Are there any more queries or comments? Thanks, members. In which case, the recommendation is to consider and approve the internal audit plan for Q1 26-27, which was Appendix 1, and to review and approve CMAP internal audit charter, which was Appendix 2. Are we all happy with the recommendations? Yeah. Thank you, members. In that case, we move on to item number 12, which is the committee self-assessment exercise report of the working group. There's two elements to this. We each have a report. I want to thank the working group for the work that they've done. It's a brilliant quality, the best I've seen. And the recommendations are solid. So what I'd like to do, if members are okay, is work through the 10 recommendations one at a time and quickly decide now as a committee whether we'd like to adopt the recommendation or reject the recommendation. And then they can be taken forward or not appropriately. So if we're comfortable with that, members, everybody's seen the report. Councillor Wright, do you want to introduce?
Yeah, just apart from the recommendations, which I agree we need to go through one by one, can I, we've had self-assessments before and I don't think they've been very effective and very useful. Whoever thought of doing it this way, I think it's an excellent idea and ought to be repeated in the future. And I think Paul and David, I know you've expressed your thanks from them, but their expertise in this has made it a much more meaningful and rich process. And I'd just like to make the point that, there are 10 recommendations. This subgroup gave a lot of thought to those recommendations and benefited from the experience in other authorities. So, a lot of effort went into that. But there are also there were some observations in the report itself around training, etc., that once we've been through the recommendations, I think it would be worth coming back to.
Yeah, that's fine, yeah. I mean, I'm sort of not winging this, but I'm not sure exactly how to do this. What we could do is introduce each item, and then perhaps a member of the working group would like to talk for a moment on each item before we come to a conclusion. Is that the best way to work it? Okay, let's do that. And that can factor in the thoughts as well as the actual recommendation. So the first recommendation then, Audit and Governance Committee should review the role of the committee in relation to local code of governance with the intent of returning to the oversight of the committee, returning it to the oversight of the committee. Would a member of the working group like to talk about that?
I'm happy to take that, Chair, if that's okay. So obviously the self-assessment itself, as we went through it, it was talking about the local code of governance and whether the discussions we had as a group was whether we actually saw that or not. And I think we came to the conclusion very quickly that as an audit committee, we didn't see that and felt that we should, you know, considering our role as an audit committee. And I think we come back to the terms of reference later in the agenda. We are very much about governance. So I think we should, or came to the conclusion that we should certainly have some oversight on that local code of governance before it goes for review or approval to the relevant committee, board, whatever.
Thank you. Quite straightforward, that one.
Can I just comment on that, Chair? I don't think we have an actual separate local code of governance. I think that it's in the actual AGS document itself. If I'm right, I think that's right, isn't it, Jack? We don't have a separate one, so I don't think there's. But I think we've acknowledged that, you know, there's improvements that we can make to the AGS. I think when we considered it at the last committee, there were some areas of clarity that was sought, but also some improvements in terms of the refresh that we're going to do for the 25-26 AGS statement. But in terms of a separate code, I don't think that exists.
That would make a review challenging, wouldn't it? Does that, yeah, please?
Yeah, if I come back on that, Chair, and probably try and help the committee. I think my experience in local government is that a lot of local authorities do have a separate local code of governance, but I'm not challenging Alison on that in any way. I'm not saying that we should go down that route in particular. I think we need to take on board, in light of what Alison has said, that perhaps then we look at the AGS for the next one we will see will be 25-26, and reflect on whether we as a committee are happy with what is actually included in that AGS, bearing in mind all the other recommendations we've talked about as a committee around that. So maybe that's the way forward on this particular one.
So in effect then the recommendation remains the same, but we're flipping the document. Yeah. So now it's pretty straightforward. Are we happy with the recommendation, members? Or sort of speak up if you're not. Okay. So the second recommendation here is that the committee should engage periodically with the appropriate partner audit and governance committees to discuss issues of mutual interest, explore good practice and develop relationships. There's potentially an opportunity to do that through MCA, and that might be the route of least resistance here, but would a member of the group like to speak about that?
Yeah, I'm happy to take that one again, Chair. Again, it's relatively straightforward, and again, from my experience in local government, I have seen audit committees getting together, particularly within a county, whether that be city, district, county, audit committees and audit committee chairs, and so we thought it would be appropriate to bring them together to share that expertise, and it just does seem the right thing to do and a sensible thing to do. And there should be enough audit committees, certainly within the county of Derbyshire itself, to kind of draw on some expertise.
Councillor Kerr.
I was wondering what was done already within the LGA and whether the LGA does sort of shared training examples, or LGA within the East Midlands. And maybe we ought to explore that as well, rather than necessarily setting up another structure to do something similar.
That's a good point. I mean, there's not a great deal, is the answer. There's a training session, I think, once a year, perhaps, for chairs and vice chairs. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, I think there is a availability of trading through the LGA. I don't think there's any specific forum, Lucy, that you're alluding to. And I've certainly, sitting on the Fire and Rescue Authority Audit Committee and now on MCA as well, I think there's, I personally wouldn't suggest that we do it, regularly, but I do think it's worthwhile having the ability to do it every so often, because just like this exercise was really useful from my perspective as a non-expert, I think we could gain insight in terms of, or I should say, this was all about trying to improve our ability as a audit and governance group to fulfil our own work. I think this is a useful additional way of doing it.
And I agree with that, but I'm just thinking that it might be politically more tactful to ask the LGA to be organising something rather than us setting it up ourselves. So I'm not disagreeing, but I'm just thinking that maybe the mechanism is using the LGA for this purpose.
It could be explored. I mean, it feels like an informal type of thing for me, and in which case the capability already exists for any of the chairs to speak to any of the other chairs and, all get round a table. How formal it needs to be is the question.
Just another point. There's a regional scrutiny group similar to what Lucy suggests, that meet periodically to discuss best practice, but that is very, meets very regular, very formal. Whereas I was thinking this would be more informal and set up more on an ad hoc basis, when appropriate.
So, looking at the recommendation then, I don't have any issue with it, but I would prefer personally to keep it as an informal thing, perhaps handled through member services, if that's okay, where it can be coordinated on a frequency, a low frequency, and dealt with like that rather than a formalised thing. That would be my thought. Does anybody have any other thought?
Just purely in practical terms, not all district councils have audit committees. Derbyshire Dales doesn't have an audit committee, for instance. And also it's got limited legs with local reorganisation coming along, but, it's just practicalities, really.
Can I suggest a way forward? We're actually going through local government reorganisation, and a good starting point might be the authorities within our proposed region to actually, and it could do two benefits: fulfil the outcome of this and potentially assist with the preparation for local government reorganisation.
Yeah, I think that's a sensible route. So if we write as a committee to other committees within the authority and just explore with the idea, this is what's come out of our session, is there an appetite for this? Because if it's going to be a meeting for one, it's not going to work. But if there's an appetite across the network, then I'm sure it will fly. But if we're happy to go forward on that basis, let's do that then. Thank you. The third recommendation on here is that the committee should meet with the head of audit in private. What's driving that one?
That's me. Okay. Thank you. Excuse me. This is something that I think happens in most audit committees. Within our terms of reference at the moment, we have the opportunity to meet with internal audit privately, but it doesn't actually happen. It hasn't happened in the last few years at least. And looking at the new global internal audit standards, in there it's a little bit more straightforward. It doesn't say that there should be the opportunity to the meeting. It actually says that it's an essential condition of the board to meet with internal audit privately on occasion, at least annually, to discuss any concerns from both parties. And so that's the reason for the recommendation.
Thanks. Yeah, I have a view, but we can discuss. Councillor Wilson. It
can be anything. That either internal audit want to raise or we want to raise that can be discussed in great detail, perhaps, when it's not in a public meeting. And I say any concerns being raised from any issues that audit have, or if everything's going fine.
Well, I'll leave it to committee and head of audit to make decisions, but in my experience, the ability to have a meeting is more powerful than having a structured meeting frequency, or the meeting might end up being a discussion over nothing if forced that way. And second to that, my opinion is that as much as possible, transparency is the way forward. However, I'm absolutely happy for committee to make decisions on this. Did you want to comment, head of audit?
I think I was just going to obviously confirm I understand the requirement of the Global Internal Audit Standard, and obviously you're correct and I understand and agree with your interpretation of it. Also to reiterate, yes, it's in the terms of reference for this committee. It's also within the Internal Audit Charter that we have the opportunity to meet with committee in private without officers present. I think the thing that I would say is the reason we haven't had to have any private meetings is because there hasn't been anything that I haven't been willing to say without officers in the room, or outside of outside of a public meeting. So I haven't felt the need to call a private meeting. I think the thing that I would just want to be very clear on is what we were intending to cover within those private meetings if they were to occur, because what I wouldn't want is to set up a meeting, everyone trundle along, and then me say I've got nothing to discuss with you, and it'd be a waste of everyone's time. So I think if we were looking to introduce those, I'd need a bit of a steer on what committee were actually wanting me to cover that I'm not already covering within the updates that I give to this committee.
Thank you. Another quick thought is that I'm not sure you could have any actions or recommendations out of a private meeting. That's another point. But Mr. Sunderland.
Sorry, it's the same recommendation really as, I think, number 8, which is the same thing for with external auditors as well. In my experience doing this at a housing, I was on board of a housing association, very large housing association for a number of years. We used to just have 15, 20 minutes before the actual meeting with the auditors, and that's the practical way forward. And yes, there may be something, there may not be something to talk about, but you don't need to organise a separate meeting or anything like that. You just do 15, 20 minutes before, say in our case 10 o'clock. Just have a pre-meet of some kind. That's all it means really in practical terms. Whether there's anything to say, either from the member's point of view or from the auditor's point of view, whether it's internal or external auditor, well, we don't know. It may happen, it may not happen, but the opportunity should be there. That's the way I look at it.
I guess the opportunity is there. It just needs to be triggered in this case. But either one, that's a good question. I guess either party could trigger the conversation. Yeah. And it sort of brings me over to another point. We've got whistleblowing policies, etc. So if you do have a genuine concern, the last thing I would want is for a member of this committee to sit and think, I'll leave that for 3 weeks because I'm going to see the head of audit then, and I'll save it for then. That's another thought. But Councillor Kerr.
I was going to say that if I thought there was something that needed to be talked about, I would go to yourself as chair and say, I think we should be talking about this, and have a discussion and arrange something. And I think we have the capacity to do that at the moment. If we feel the need, or, it's not something we can put onto the agenda of the committee.
Yeah, thanks. Councillor Wright?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with all of the sentiments. I think another pertinent point is the next item of the agenda is going to be about terms of reference of this committee, when we're going to be advised to comply with CITFA recommendations around how these committees should operate, and CITFA does recommend that we do meet in private once a year. And I take Hannah's point in terms of nothing to report over the period, and Paul's in terms of when we would redo it. I think that this is about having the opportunity. We know as councillors we have an opportunity to do it, because I certainly wasn't aware of that. There may be issues we want to raise. I think we can be flexible how we do it. It says once a year. there doesn't seem to me a great need to actually do it after every meet or before every meeting. So I think we ought to just put it in the forward plan for once a year, and recognising if there are issues either councillors or Hannah wants to raise, we can do them ad hoc as well.
Thanks, Councillor Wright. Great wording. So if we can use that wording and apply it to recommendations 3 and 8, let's go to a decision. What do we think? Are we in favour of the annual meeting as a structured, agendaed thing?
Apologies. Thank you, Chair. The only consideration in that case is that you would need a reason not to conduct your formal business in private, and unless you have particular information that you're going to be receiving, which I think part of the proposal is that you may not, then it would be hard to make that justification. So I think that's part of why I think one of the ways that other committees have done it is that they have the informal meeting before the formal meeting. And also you couldn't do it afterwards because it would be difficult, were a member of the public to attend, to say we're closing the meeting, we're not going into private session, but we are going to ask you to leave. So that there's a difficult. I think there's a difficulty in making it a formal agenda item. It would have to be some kind of informal arrangement.
As long as it's an informal but regular arrangement, I think that's what we're saying. But yeah, members, are we for or are we against?
My personal view is that I think we have a mechanism that if something needs to come forward, we can use it. Otherwise, we can have a discussion more openly and in public. And I can't see what we would use a scheduled private session for, because if it's important, we'd have dealt with it before that anyway. So I would say we don't need to do it.
So that's one against, in effect, to use blunt language. Currently, with just one vote against, it's going to fail. Does anybody else have anything else to say on the matter?
Yeah, I'm not quite sure, Kieran, what we're actually... The recommendations, you should meet with audit in private. Can't we just leave it at that? And then whenever we feel either from an external or internal auditor's perspective or councillors or members' perspective, we actually have the meeting.
Yeah, so I think it does deserve a bit more clarity, doesn't it? Thanks, Joe, for the request. So what we're basically saying is this structured, even if it's informal, or are we happy that the arrangement we've got right now is sufficient, where it can be triggered by either party on request?
Should we change the word should to can?
That's already the case, though, isn't it?
Yeah, well, that's what I think we're doing.
Yeah. In which case the recommendations are acknowledged, but not as they're worded, not taken on board, because we already have the ability. A diligent chair could make sure it happens annually. It's in their power.
I might sit on the fence a little bit. We will have, CMAP will have the external quality assessment falling in the 2027-28 financial year. That might give us a bit of guidance around whether what we've currently got is sufficient based on that external assessment. And if it isn't, maybe revisit the conversation at that point in time and see how we need to improve. So there's the potential that we could be potentially criticised if we don't have these private meetings, but equally the assessor could turn around and say, actually, we're happy with the ability to meet, you've just not had to trigger those actual private sessions. So I guess it depends on whether the committee's happy to wait and see what happens with that external quality assessment, or whether they would rather we just introduce something now to make sure we won't be criticised in the future.
Okay, I think that's what I'm hearing, is that we should perhaps leave it as it is, but be prepared for the feedback that it needs to be altered. Are we comfortable with that for recommendations 3 and 8?
sort of a part-way point here that if we had a note as a standard line on our papers for committee that said members should remember that it is possible to organise a private meeting if required, please talk to the chair, or some terminology like that, which would show that we're acknowledging the situation, bring it to people's attention, but we don't need to utilise it unless we need to.
See why that would give us an opportunity to demonstrate compliance, but it's already in the terms of reference, mind you. Okay, I think we're resolved, unless there's any more comments on that. Resolved to leave these leave it as it is, but be prepared for feedback that we might need to formalise that structure. Recommendation number 4. The committee should annually examine and approve the action plan resulting from the review of the Financial Management Code. Does anybody want to speak about that?
I'll take that one again, Chair. Hopefully a little less controversial, this one. The Financial Management Code is referenced in the terms of reference that we see later. If you look on page 187 of the pack, number 9, it talks about considering effectiveness of financial management arrangements, including compliance with the SIPF's Financial Management Code. As a working group, when we were talking, we couldn't remember or can't recall ever seeing anything that comes before this committee that talks about how the city is performing against the Financial Management Code. So I don't know if Alison can help us on that one.
I think it's been to committee. I can't access the work plan, Jack, so I was just trying to message you, but the action plan does come. If we've missed it this year with the late production of the statement of accounts, then I apologise for that, but I know it has been, and I'm fairly sure it's been this year. So accept the recommendation.
I was going to say, that is accepted and we think we've done it. Yeah, but we can check. Thank you. Number 5 then. The committee should ensure the annual governance statement reflects current concerns of that the recommendations of the internal audit are not systemically implemented.
So again, Chair, I think it's fairly straightforward. Again, we've already talked about the AGS this morning. And again, I think as a working group, we were reflecting on the reports that we've seen from internal audit around those outstanding recommendations, and a lot of time has been spent asking questions as a committee on those recommendations, quite rightly, some that have been outstanding a long time, and the progress against those, and we've had separate meetings outside this committee with the relevant directors as well. And so I think it was just fell, and I'm sure that Alison has probably got this in hand, that should be reflected in the AGS for 25-26, the work that the committee has done and the concerns that we as a committee have around that. However, I think what we also need to accept is that this morning we've discussed the progress on that, but that doesn't take away from the fact that for the first part of the year we were pushing as a committee to understand more about those outstanding recommendations.
Again, quite straightforward. Does anybody want to come in on that, or are we happy to accept? Yeah, we'll accept that one. Number 6, the internal audit should ensure that an audit of RM is considered as part of their annual planning.
Yeah, so we discussed risk management at length at this committee at various times, and it was an area that, as a subgroup, we reflected on quite a lot, and we didn't see it as it's been a while since risk management's been audited, and basically what we're saying is that we'd like head of internal audit to actually consider it each year whether it ought to be in the annual audit. So that's.
I don't know if I'm just being a bit picky, but I take issue with the word consider. It is considered as part of the quarterly planning activity. We consider audits across the whole authority, so it is already considered. So I would suggest that recommendation is already being met. It might not always result in an actual internal audit coming through into the internal audit plan and actually an audit being delivered for you, but there is always consideration of that. I'd just like to obviously point out, as has been discussed a few times already at this committee, we're moving towards LGR. Part of moving towards LGR from an internal audit point of view, we will start to be looking at some of the governance arrangements within the organisation a little bit more closely with our LGR focus, that will include risk management. So you will be starting to see risk management and other governance type audits coming forward into the audit plan. I am personally waiting for a bit more clarity of what LGR is actually going to look like, what that new authority will be, and some confirmation around the dates we're actually working to, before I actually start putting those individual audit assignments in the plan and start to deliver on those. But just to confirm, it is always considered as a piece of work.
So can I just suggest a slight amendment that we put continues then?
So, yeah, it's another good recommendation, but something that's already been done. Accept your comments about LGR, yeah. Number 7 then, the committee should examine the full risk register twice annually. It's pretty straightforward. Does somebody want to talk about that?
Yeah, so again, this is another one that we discussed in a lot of detail in the working group. We don't actually see the full risk register at all at the moment. But obviously it's actually a crucial piece of assurance and governance for this group. So we consider we ought to see the full risk register, and we ought to see it twice a year so that we can actually examine it in depth. And I think the reasons are probably fairly obvious, because we do often want to go below the surface. And you know, the other issues we don't know what we don't know basically.
Seems reasonable. While we're making requests, I wonder if it can be presented twice annually rather than just distributed, because it's a lot of data to go through. But yeah, do you want to come back on?
Yeah, Chair, just to say, we're happy with that recommendation. You know, it's absolutely reasonable. I think what we'd say from an officer's perspective is that the full we wouldn't be comfortable with the full risk register being in an open session. It would have to be in a private session because of, you know, some of the confidentiality around that. But happy to facilitate that.
That's a good point. So we split it then. As much as possible, it's transparent, but on the advice of officers, elements of it are held into private committee. Councillor Kerr.
And I'm just a bit concerned about the idea of the full risk register, because there's a strategic risk register and there are various operational risk registers, and there may be other registers as well held in different places. And I'm not sure what we're precisely referring to.
I've interpreted it as the strategic risk register.
Okay.
Is that the intention of committee?
But let's clarify that then.
Yeah, I think it's basically at the strategic level, yeah, not each individual department or process or whatever.
All available on request, Councillor Kerr, I'm sure. Yeah. Okay, so I guess that's accepted. Thank you. Item 8 we've dealt with. Number 9, the head of internal audit should consider the authority's arrangements to review and assess performance are satisfactory following the presentation of the annual review of performance in 26. Would you like to talk about that one?
I can take that one, Chair. So if you look at the framework itself, the SIPFA framework, it talks about reviewing particular projects and programmes to ensure that we've got governance and assurance. And yes, as a committee, we see some of that work. There's no doubt about that throughout the year. But then it said around arrangements in terms of performance. So I think we felt that it's not for this committee to look at the detail of performance. It's for this committee to make sure that the performance framework of the council is adequate and does give us assurance that the processes are in place to make sure that we can review and assess performance across the organisation.
Thank you. What do we feel about that one? Seems pretty straightforward. Are we happy to take the recommendation, support it? Thank you. The last recommendation on here then is that the committee should ensure that the value for money recommendation of external audit are monitored and reported back as part of the delivery plan.
Again, Chair, I'll take that one. We sat down again as a working group, looked at what the requirements were around value for money arrangements, and I think we reflected actually on the last audit committee when the external audit report came and we looked at it, and there was some discussion certainly around how we look at value for money, and there was talk of benchmarking as well. So we need to look at the external audit value for money opinion, but we perhaps need to look alongside other detailed value for money information that comes before this committee. And I'd say there was definitely some interest around how we compare with other local authorities. So I think we just need to reflect that in our work programme somewhere.
Thank you. Can we do that? Yeah, accepted. Thank you. And thanks once again to the group for the work that they did. Thanks also to Jack for preparing this nice one-pager with all of the recommendations listed. That's made my life easier. So having said that, our recommendation on the agenda was to review the working group recommendations and endorse as appropriate. I feel like we've achieved that, so we can move on to the next item of the agenda, which is item number 13. This is the committee terms of reference. Jack, do you want to introduce this?
Chair, can I just before we leave that item, there were the other observations in the report around members' training and officers' input committee. Can we just cover those before we?
Absolutely. Do you want to introduce them, John, and we'll cover them now?
Yeah, so one of the things that other part of the self-assessment was the members' training. We considered how training has been done before, and like the idea that was picked up from another authority, that we have an audit academy, which is basically online training, and we've given a list of potential subjects so that members can dip in and out whenever they want to actually improve their understanding. We also noted, and I think this is worth reflecting, the support that we get from officers and from democratic services now, and all this is intended to improve our ability. But we did think that there was an issue in terms of making sure that when officers do give their input, that they ought to assume that members have read the papers and that the presentation is recognises that and probably focuses on not on the content, information provision, but really on what the key issues, the recommendations, but also any issues that they feel ought to be emphasised or we ought to focus on, using the benefit of their knowledge and understanding rather than just providing information.
Thanks. Yeah, I mean, that's probably something we can control at the point we invite people to the meetings, so we can take that one on. On the training, the academy, are we talking about an expense here? Is this a new tool or?
Yeah, sorry, it's something that happens in one of the other audit committees that I go to. No, it isn't an expense. It's sort of half hour or maybe an hour at most sessions spread throughout the year on particular topics that are relevant to the committee, and usually given by officers from that area.
Sounds like a wonderful thing. If we can tap into it, then can we explore that, Councillor Kerr?
I would welcome regular training. The planning committee does a 3/4 of an hour-ish session before each of its meetings, which I think are quite useful. I think it would be useful also, if we do something like that, for it to be open to all councillors. People aren't going to turn up unless they're really keen, but I think in principle it would be useful for them to be open to all.
I'm sorry, no, that's fine. You're asking me about. No, right, okay. I'm saying I think we have given some training. I think in the past we did the treasury management one, didn't we? But I think opening out to other councillors would be really beneficial, and engaging with you on a work programme around what that additional training, where you think that value would be. So yeah, absolutely.
Apologies, Chair, just for committee's benefit, Democratic Services are currently drafting a councillor training and development strategy that we're planning to bring to the annual meeting in May, and we'd be happy to take a recommendation from this committee to incorporate that type of training into the annual programme. As Councillor Kerr alludes to, we could look to replicate what we do for the Planning Committee and the Licensing Committee, where bite-sized training sessions are delivered by officers in the half an hour prior to the meeting, perhaps.
Thank you. So we'll make the recommendation as a committee. Thank you. Are there any other points to raise off that? Yeah. Okay. Thank you. In that case, we will move on to item number 13 then, which is the committee terms of reference. And Jack, you will introduce this.
Thank you, Chair. Pursuant to what Councillor Wright has just said, I won't go through all the details of the report, but it's to focus specifically on, I think, the main aspect of the report, which is the remit for policies and the recommendation to relinquish decision-making powers in respect of certain parts, specifically the whistleblowing policy, counter-fraud policy and risk management framework. That is pursuant to a recommendation of SIPFA in their guidance that the Audit Committee has explicitly no decision-making role. That's as a result of maintaining its independence as a body and being able to provide independent assurance for an organisation. The other decision-making power which is proposed to relinquish is the power to agree the internal audit strategy. And Hannah may be better placed to provide you with a little bit of background on that.
Yeah, so the strategy document, I don't believe under the global internal audit standards and the new CIPRA notes around that there is a requirement for this committee to approve that strategy document. I believe it says that it can come here for noting and discussion or wording to that effect. Because CMAP is obviously a partnership and our strategy would cover all of the organisation, to then have to bring it to each committee of each partner is a little bit of I guess, an administrative burden and could potentially create problems if this committee wanted to accept it, but another committee wanted to make changes. So what we propose is that strategy goes forward to the governance processes within CMAP itself. So it would go through to CMAP Operational Group firstly for consideration, then through to the CMAP Board for authorisation and approval at that point.
Thank you both for explaining. So it's about removing barriers, continuing as a consultee. Does anybody have any queries or comments on the proposal? Councillor Wright.
Yeah, I mean, I would defer to some of our independent members around the internal audit one, because I'm not entirely clear what the difference is, but I'll take your point in that. I've just got a question. I can understand like whistleblowing, for example, and counter fraud, not this group not approving. The risk management framework is one I'd ask at some stage. Is it the case that this committee or another committee said it ought to sit here, and if it did, then they probably had reasons why this committee should actually approve it. And you know, it'd be for me, before we actually take it out, I'd like to understand why it was actually given to this committee to approve in the first place, because there may have been quite justifiable reasons why we go against a SIPFA strategy, if that makes sense.
Certainly before my time. Do you have any insight?
I can say that we looked into the history of the Audit Committee going right back to being audit and accounts, and it was always there. And I imagined that at the point it was first set up in something like 2006 something, that was the that was just the decision that was taken at that point. There are some complexities in respect of actually the way that governance frameworks work for local authorities and where decisions can be filtered down. Some sit with council and some sit with cabinet. I think it would be advisable in this case that risk management framework should sit on the cabinet side, and perhaps at that initial stage that point wasn't picked up, and so that's to amend this, to kind of amend that issue that's happened historically.
Councillor Kerr, did you?
I just feel that it's really difficult when we may be approving something that is then going through to full council as a non-executive issue. And if we're not supposed to be approving things, then it's a bit difficult for us to approve them. But so maybe what we ought to be doing is to be deciding to refer them to full council rather than approving them for full council. It's just where the terminology the practicality is going to be the same, but the terminology is what needs to be, which may be what we would be audited on. I don't know. And I'm not sure who would scrutinise us in those terms either.
It is a good point. Terminology is a challenge. Being a consultee and not an approval authority, what do? You don't approve something. You review it, I suppose, and then pass it on for further review. But it can be considered at the time. The principle of it, I think, is still quite sound. Are there any more queries or comments, or are we happy to take the recommendation, which is to review the committee? Sorry, on the wrong one. Yeah. Which is to recommend to the council that the committee's terms of reference are amended as per Appendix 1. In the absence of any concerns, then I think we're comfortable with that. Yeah. Thank you. Which moves us on then to item 14, which is the committee work programme for 25-26. It's in as item 13. It is item 14, but members have seen it nonetheless. Does anybody have any queries or comments?
Yeah. I just noticed that the waivers update has been deleted from March, and that's been, I think, deleted in the previous meeting as well. Is there anything happening about the waivers update?
It has just been continually deferred. We'll keep asking the question, and it's just balancing the resource and getting the timings right to make sure it comes forward. But it is on our radar.
Thank you. Any more queries or concerns? Okay. Thanks, members. That brings us to a close today. There's no note of a next meeting. Is that because we're ending the municipal year? Yeah, okay. So watch this space, members. Thanks for attending, and thanks for everything throughout the last municipal year, and enjoy the rest of your day.